Benita was not new to Accra life. In fact, she understood it too well. Accra did not confuse her. She moved through it like someone who had already figured out the rules. On Fridays, she was out of the city. The music, the lights, the crowd. It was normal to her. She knew which places were loud and which ones people went just to be seen. On Sundays, she was in East Legon having brunch with friends, talking about outfits, money, and small gossip that ended in laughter. During the week, she was either at work or shopping, and when she went shopping, it was never small. Bags, shoes, dresses, since she didn't always pay for herself. People around her noticed that too. Some admired it, some envied it, some quietly judged it. But Benita acted like she didn't see any of it. Her friend Amma had known her for years, and she never hesitated to talk freely around her. One afternoon, they were in a dressing room trying on clothes for an event that weekend. Benita stood in front of the mirror adjusting a dress that fit so well. Amma leaned on the chair behind her and said, Benita, honestly, if life was a competition, you have already won it emotionally. Benita looked at her reflection and smiled a little. Competition for what? She asked. Amma shrugged. Everything. Money, attention, life, men. You have experienced all of it. Benita turned. And is that a problem? Amma smiled and shook her head. No, I'm just saying you move like someone who is not afraid of anything. Benita went back to adjusting the dress. I'm not afraid of anything, she replied. Amma tilted her head. Even men? That question made Benita stop for a moment. Then she laughed. Especially men. Amma laughed too. Ah, Benita. While Benita changed back into her clothes, Amma continued. Okay, on a serious note though, Benita picked up her bag. You always say on a serious note and then talk nonsense. Amma ignored her and continued. Why don't you stay with one man? Like, be faithful to one man. Benita paused. Not because she didn't understand the question, but because she understood it too well. She looked at Amma and gave a small smile. I don't stay where I'm not valued. Amma raised her brows immediately. That one is your slogan now. Benita walked out of the dressing room. It's not a slogan, it's my standard. Amma followed her. Standard or escape routes? Benita stopped walking and looked at her. What do you mean? Amma didn't back down. I mean, every time things start getting serious, you are gone. 1 month, 2 months, maximum 5 months, then you move on. Benita adjusted her bag strap. If something is not right, I leave. Simple. Our side. But is it always that is not right, or you just don't want anything to hold you down? Benita didn't answer immediately. She continued walking towards the exit. I like my peace, she said finally. Amma followed quietly for a moment, then added in a lower voice, or you like your freedom too much. Benita heard it but didn't respond. Outside, the sun was bright. The street was busy. Cars were moving. People were shouting. Accra was doing what Accra does the most. Benita stopped for a moment, put on her sunglasses and looked around. Amma came to stand beside her. You're always like this, Amma said. Like what? Benita asked. Like you're enjoying everything but you're not building anything permanent. Benita turned her head. I'm building myself. Amma nodded slowly. Yourself is strong, but what about when you want more than yourself? That question hung for a second. Benita looked away. Then she smiled again, softer this time. When that time comes, I will deal with it. They walked to the car park. Amma opened her car door but paused before entering. She looked at Benita again. You know people talk about you, right? Benita didn't look surprised. I know. Amma continued. Some say you're enjoying life. Others say you don't take anything seriously. Benita shrugged. People always talk. Amma nodded. Yes, but I know you better than them. Benita looked at her. Amma's voice softened. You're not careless. You're just always moving before things get deep. Benita didn't respond immediately. For a second, she just stood there. Then she smiled. If things get too deep, People drown. Amma opened her car door. Or maybe you just don't know how to swim in deep water. She got in and closed the door. Benita remained standing alone for a moment. The noise of the city filled the space around her. She adjusted her sunglasses and walked towards her own car. But as she walked, one thought stayed quietly in her mind. Maybe Amma talks too much. She unlocked her door and got in and started the engine. But even as she drove off into the busy Accra traffic, the question didn't leave her completely. It just stayed quietly in the background of her thoughts, like something she wasn't ready to answer yet. Months passed and Benita turned 28. This time she felt different. Not like a sudden decision that you can point to and say, this is where everything changed. This was the kind of shift you only notice when you're alone. That night, she left a party in Labadi earlier than usual. The music had been loud for hours. People were laughing, dancing, taking pictures, living in the moments like nothing else mattered. Benita was part of it too. She had always been. She had smiled, greeted people, danced when she felt like, sat down when she wanted, and moved between conversations like she belonged everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But when she finally stepped into the taxi, everything changed. As the door closed behind her, the noise stayed outside, and suddenly there was a silence. The driver started without asking much. Home? He asked. Yes, she replied. At first, she leaned back like usual, scrolling through her phone. But after a few minutes, she stopped scrolling. She looked outside. Accra at night was moving fast. Headlights passed one after the other. People stood by the roadside, talking, laughing, waiting. Everything looked alive, but she didn't feel it inside her. Her reflection appeared faintly on the glass. She studied it without meaning to. Her makeup was still perfect, her hair still in place, her dress expensive looking. Everything looked fine, but her eyes, they looked tired in a way she hadn't noticed before. The music from the club that used to be in her head now felt far away, like it belonged to someone else. And then a message came in her phone. She looked down. Amma sent a message. We go next week again, right? Benita stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She started to type something, but she stopped, deleted it, typed again, then stopped again. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. Madam, you dey okay? He asked casually. Benita looked up quickly. Yes, yes, I'm fine, she said while forcing a smile. But as soon as he looked away, the smile faded. Amma sent another message. You didn't answer me, oh. Benita exhaled slowly. She leaned her head back against the seat. For the first time that night, she wasn't thinking about what happened at the party. She wasn't thinking about who she saw or who she spoke to. She wasn't thinking about plans for the weekend either. She was thinking about her own life, about how many men she had slept with that week, about how many mornings she woke up and didn't feel like anything had really changed in her life, even though so much was happening. Then she asked herself a question she had been avoiding for years. What exactly have I been building with my life? Just then, a voice message came in again from Amma. Benita, talk now, what's wrong? This time, Benita didn't reply the message immediately. She just held the phone in her hand. Then she turned it off. The taxi moved through a more quiet road now. Benita looked outside again, and this time, her thoughts came out loudly. You know what? I can't do this forever. The driver slowed down, looking very confused. Do what, ma'am? He asked. Benita, realizing herself quickly, said, No, 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 not you. But inside her, she made a decision that she was done with this lifestyle. 3 weeks later, a friend had invited Benita for a weekend visit where there would be small gathering. Nothing serious, just people eating, talking and laughing, that's all. When Benita got the invitation, she almost didn't go, but she went anyway. When she arrived at the venue that day, a man named Kojo was there the moment she arrived. He was sitting away from the main group, holding a drink, listening more than speaking. When people greeted him, he responded politely. Benita noticed that immediately. Most people she knew tried too hard to be seen, but Kojo didn't. Later that day, someone introduced them casually. Benita, this is Kojo, he said. Kojo, this is Benita. They greeted politely. No long introduction, no forced conversation, just that. After that greeting, Kojo didn't rush to impress Benita. He didn't follow her around the room trying to get her number. He didn't even try to sit close to her. He simply continued sipping his drink. Benita, on the other hand, found out strange. Men usually rush to get her number and even appreciate her for her beauty. So she wondered why Kojo was acting in that way. At some point during the evening, she stepped outside to take a call. When she returned, Kojo was still in the same place, but this time he looked up briefly and said, "You're back." Benita nodded, "Yes." Then she said, "Did you move at all?" Kojo gave a smile. "I've been here." And just like that, they started talking. Over the next few days, they saw each other often. Kojo didn't dominate conversations. He didn't interrupt. He didn't compete for attention. When Benita spoke, he listened properly. And when he spoke, it was usually simple and clear. One afternoon, they ended up sitting outside together. The music still played faintly from inside. Kojo looked at her and asked, "So tell me, what is it like living in Accra?" Benita smiled. "Busy, loud, and expensive." Kojo nodded like he understood. Benita continued, "Everyone is always in a hurry." Kojo didn't argue. He just said, "I don't like that kind of life." That statement stayed in the air for a moment. Benita turned her face toward him. Then, "What kind of life do you like?" Kojo quickly said, "A simple, calm life." Benita laughed nervously. "Simple sounds boring." Kojo looked at her directly. "Peace is not boring." She didn't reply immediately because that answer felt too direct. Days turned into weeks. They started talking even often. Phone calls at first, then longer conversation. Kojo would ask questions, but not in a way that felt like an interrogation. He asked like someone trying to understand a person and not to define them. "What do you do when you're not working?" he asked over the phone. "I go out," Benita would say. "To where?" Kojo would ask. "It depends," Benita would reply. Kojo paused for a few seconds, then asked, "Depends on what?" Benita smiled. "Depends on my mood." Kojo would nod, but he didn't fully understand it. One evening at a restaurant, after they had been talking for weeks, Kojo asked her something different. It wasn't random. It felt like he had been thinking about it for a while. "So," he said, "how many serious relationships have you had?" Benita leaned back. Her heart skipped immediately, and her mind started calculating different men on different nights. She lost count in the process, then smiled very nervously. Why do you want to know?" Kojo didn't change his expression. He just shrugged. "I like honesty, and I don't like surprises later." That word stayed with her longer than expected. She reached for her glass of water and took a small sip. Kojo, of course, waited. He didn't rush her. He didn't repeat the question. Benita placed the glass down carefully. Then she said, "Not many, just one serious one." Kojo looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I can work with that." Benita smiled again and changed the topic. Kojo, of course, followed her lead and the conversation continued sweetly. 6 months later, marriage came faster than Benita's expectation. Kojo didn't propose in a dramatic way. There was no public scene, no crowd, no big announcements. It happened on a normal evening after they had eaten dinner together. They were sitting in the living room, the television playing in the background without anyone really watching it. Kojo turned to her and said, "I don't want to waste time doing things that don't lead anywhere." Benita looked at him. "What do you mean?" Kojo paused, like he was choosing his words carefully. "I mean, you are someone I want to build with, not just to talk to." Benita didn't respond immediately. She just nodded because she understood exactly what he meant. 4 days later, The conversation continued naturally. Kojo said, "If you're not sure, we don't have to rush anything." And Benita replied, I'm sure, I just don't want noise around it." Kojo nodded, "Then we'll keep it simple." And they did. The wedding planning was calm. No drama between families, no argument about money or guest list. Everything moved like two people who were not trying to impress the world. Benita noticed something strange during that period. Kojo didn't stress her, not once. He would ask for her opinion, wait for her response, and accept it without trying to change her mind. Even when she expected disagreements, it didn't come. It felt easy, sometimes too easy, but she didn't question it too deeply because peace in that moment of her life felt like something she had earned. The wedding day came on a warm afternoon in Accra. It was not a big wedding event, no long guest list filled with strangers, just family and close friends. Benita sat in front of the mirror before the ceremony. After a makeup artist had finished the final touches on her face, Amma stood behind her, watching. "You look like a new person," she said. Benita smiled. "I'm a new person now." Amma laughed. "Okay, oh, Mrs. Kojo." Benita turned her head a little. "Don't start." Amma raised her hands. "I'm just saying no." A few minutes later, Amma sat beside Benita. There was a short silence between them. Then Amma broke it first. "So, this is it?" she asked. Benita looked at her. "Yes." Amma leaned closer. "You're really done with all that life now?" Benita didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I've done enough of that life." Amma nodded slowly. "I'm happy for you." When Benita walked down the aisle, Kojo was already standing there waiting. He looked calm. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod. Benita responded with a soft smile. The ceremony itself moved quickly. Vows were exchanged, promises were made, and the congregation clapped. At the reception, laughter filled the air. Music played loudly. People took pictures, ate, danced, and congratulated them repeatedly. Our pulled Benita aside at some point, away from the crowd. She looked at her closely. "You're really getting married," Amma said again, like she wasn't still processing it. Benita laughed. "Yes now, or you don't want me to get married?" Amma covered up with a smile, then lowered her voice a bit. "I'm just surprised, that's all." Benita paused for a second. Then she immediately said, "That's all in the past now, Amma. I'm a changed person." And with that, she turned and walked back towards Kojo, slipping easily into the celebration, into the smiles, into the version of herself everyone could understand. But inside, it wasn't that simple. It felt like she had rushed past something she was supposed to sit with, like she had closed a door without checking what was still inside. She was smiling, talking, laughing, but a part of her felt slightly out of place, like she was playing along with a moment she hadn't fully caught up with. Their first year was beautiful, too beautiful, the kind of beauty that doesn't demand attention because it already feels steady enough to trust. Nothing felt forced, nothing felt uncertain. Life moved in a rhythm that almost made Benita forget how complicated life used to feel. Kojo was consistent in a way she wasn't used to. Every morning before she fully woke up, she would hear movements in the kitchen, water boiling, cups being placed, the soft sound of cupboards opening, then his voice. "Do you want tea or coffee?" At first, she used to laugh at it. Then one morning, she sat up in the bed and said, "Kojo, are you running a hotel inside our marriage?" Kojo appeared at the doorway holding two cups. He laughed. "If I don't ask, you will complain. If I ask, you will complain. What do women want?" Benita stretched her hand. "I'm not complaining, no." Kojo placed one cup on the bedside table. "Then what are you doing now?" She laughed properly this time and took the tea. "Maybe I like options." Kojo nodded. "Then I'll keep giving you options." And of course he did. Evenings were always the same. They would sit together after dinner, sometimes on the couch. The television would be on, but most times it was just background noise. The real thing happening was conversation. They talked about work. Kojo would explain parts of his day in detail. Benita would talk about hers too, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with humor. Kojo listened properly, and when he replied, it was never rushed. One evening, Benita leaned back and asked, "You really like listening, don't you?" Kojo turned towards her. "I like understanding." Benita raised a brow. "That's the same thing now." Kojo shook his head a little. "No. Listening is hearing. Understanding is knowing." She looked at him for a second. Then she smiled. "You talk like a man who writes book." Kojo smiled back. "I just don't like confusion." That sentence stayed with her longer than expected. Kojo didn't like confusion, and Benita had lived in a life that sometimes thrived in it. But there was one thing she never touched, not even by accident. That was her past. At first, it didn't feel strange. In fact, it felt respectful, like something both of them agreed without speaking. Benita never brought it up because she didn't see a reason to reopen what was already behind her. Kojo never brought it up because he believed people deserve a clean present if they had chosen to live differently. So they lived like that. Present tense only, no digging backward, no unnecessary questions. But silence has a way of becoming noticeable when it stays too long in a room. There were moments when Benita would ask about his childhood or his university days, and Kojo would respond normally, but never follow up too deeply. He would smile, nod, or change the topic quickly, and Benita noticed that too. But she didn't question it because she also had her own limits. One night after dinner, they sat outside their house. The air was calm. Kojo was checking something on his phone. Benita was sitting beside him, scrolling through hers. After a while, Kojo said, "You know, I like this life." Benita looked up. "What life?" Kojo looked around briefly. "This calm and peaceful life." Benita nodded slowly. "Yes, it's peaceful." Kojo leaned back. "I used to think marriage would be complicated." Benita turned towards him. "And now?" Kojo paused. "It's only complicated when people make it complicated." Benita smiled nervously. "That sounds like something you read somewhere." Kojo shook his head. "I didn't read it. I know this." Then he added, "I like that we don't have unnecessary issues." Benita replied, "We don't like stress." Kojo nodded. "Exactly." But as she said it, something tightened in her chest because no unnecessary issues also meant something else. It meant certain things were not being touched, not because they weren't there, but because they were not invited. Benita looked at Kojo for a moment. He was still focused on his phone, still calm and unbothered. She looked away, took a deep breath, and let the moment pass. That was the pattern of their first year. Love that worked, life that flowed, silence that was accepted, and underneath it all, a quiet agreement between two people to enjoy what was present without questioning what was missing. By the third year, their marriage was not going well as they hoped. Both Benita and Kojo had been wanting a child that wasn't forthcoming. At first, it didn't feel like a problem. It felt like timing. People around them even helped soften it with words. "Relax, it will come," one neighbor said. "Do you know for some people it takes time?" Another neighbor said. "Enjoy your marriage first though," the third neighbor would say to Benita. And for a while, those words worked. At home, Kojo was the first to turn it into a joke. One evening after dinner, he leaned back on the couch, looked at Benita and said, "Maybe the baby is enjoying heaven too much and doesn't want to come down." Benita laughed immediately, as if she needed to show that she was not worried. "Maybe he's not ready for Accra traffic," she replied. Kojo smiled. "Or he's waiting for the right time." Benita nodded and kept smiling. "Yes, the right time." After that night, they used jokes more often. It became a way of covering what they didn't want to sit with. Family will ask questions sometimes. Friends will make small comments, and Kojo will respond calmly, "We are not in a rush." Benita would also smile and agree, "We are fine." However, Some things began to change slowly, like water dripping into a quiet room. They stopped talking about certain things. The casual joke became less. Kojo started returning home late. Benita noticed the change but said nothing. 3 years and 6 months passed away. Still nothing. This time, people stopped asking directly. They started asking indirectly. How is everything? How is work? How is married life? Even when the question was about something else, everyone understood what it meant. At home, the atmosphere changed in ways they never discussed. Kojo still woke up early, still went to work, still came home and asked simple questions, but the house itself felt different. Like both of them were moving around something fragile without naming it. Benita noticed it most evenings. They would sit together after dinner and talk on safer topics. They would discuss about the weather, about works and plans, but the conversation didn't stretch as long as before they returned back to their phones. One evening, Benita sat on the couch and said, "Do you think we should check again?" Kojo looked up from his phone immediately. "We already checked before." Benita nodded. "Yes, I know. I mean again." Kojo didn't answer right away. He placed his phone down. "Why now?" Benita shrugged. "I just feel like we should be sure." Kojo studied her face for a moment, then said, "If there was something serious, we would have known by now." Benita nodded, but she didn't fully agree. She just didn't say it. From then on, church became more important in Benita's life. At first, it was Sunday attendance, then midweek services, then anointing services. Before anyone knew what was going on, she had added fasting, not hunger strike, but with serious prayers and capital tongues. Then she started participating more actively than she ever had in her life. She volunteered when needed. She wrote prayer requests. She went for evangelism and preached about waiting on God's time. And every time she said those words, she meant them. At home, she prayed every 3 a.m. Her voice shook the room like an earthquake. Kojo joined sometimes, praying silently, while Benita walked around speaking in tongues that had only capital letters. There was a period where it felt like faith was holding the house together. But inside Benita, something was tightening. Not pain at first, just pressure. A slow pressure she couldn't explain. It started in small moments. Seeing babies in church and feeling worried. Scrolling through social media and stopping on posts she normally wouldn't have noticed. One night, Kojo was already asleep beside her. The room was dark. Only the faint light from outside the window touched the edges of the curtains. She placed her hand on her stomach without thinking. Then she removed it immediately, like she had caught herself doing something she shouldn't have done. She turned slightly towards Kojo. He was sleeping peacefully, unbothered at that moment. Benita stared at him for a long time. Then she turned her face to the ceiling. In her mind, she heard the same thought that started visiting her quietly during the day. What if it's not timing? What if it's something else? What if the silence is not normal? She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. And for the first time, the delay didn't feel like waiting anymore. It felt like something was sitting in the middle of their life, refusing to move, and neither of them had named it yet. One evening, Kojo came home earlier than usual. There was no special reason for it. He just came in, dropped his bag near the chair, and losing his style like someone who had been carrying something in his mind for a long time. Benita was laying on the bed. Kojo stood there for a moment and watched her without speaking. Benita noticed almost immediately. She looked up. "You're back early," she said. Kojo nodded. "Yes." Then he walked closer and sat beside her on the chair. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Kojo just stared down. Benita sat upright. Something in his silence already told her this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. "Benita," Kojo finally said. She turned fully towards him. "Yes?" Kojo took a deep breath. His voice stayed calm. "Let's go to the hospital." The words landed in the room and stayed there. Benita didn't respond immediately. At first, she just looked at him like she didn't hear properly. Then she blinked once. "Hospital?" she repeated. Kojo nodded. Yes, let's check everything properly. No guessing anymore. Benita gave a small laugh. It came out automatically, but it didn't sound like her. Even she knew that. She looked away for a second and shook her head. So, now is hospital? Kojo frowned. It's not now. It's something we should have done properly a long time ago. Benita leaned forward. Her tone automatically changed. What else do we do, Kojo? We've prayed. We've fasted. We've done everything people told us to do. Kojo nodded. I know. Benita stood up. She walked towards the window and stopped there. Outside, Accra was still moving like it always did. Cars passing, distant voices here and there. Then she folded her arms. I'm fine, she said firmly. I know my body. Kojo turned to face her properly this time. That's what you've been saying, he replied, until they check and find something different. Benita turned quickly at him, faster than she meant to. Her voice came out sharper this time. I said I'm fine. The room became as quiet as ever. Kojo didn't respond immediately. He looked at her for a few seconds, then lowered his gaze. When he spoke again, his voice was calm. Then, why are you afraid of confirming it? He asked. Benita didn't answer because the question didn't have a quick answer. Kojo continued. I'm not saying something is wrong, he said. I just want us to know. That's all. Benita didn't turn back to look at him. She stayed facing the window. For a moment, she considered laughing it off again, changing the topic, or walking out of the room, just anything that would move the conversation away. But she didn't. Instead, she said with a serious tone, Kojo, I don't like hospitals. Kojo nodded. I don't like them either. Benita shook her head. It's not that. I just don't like the idea of being seen as someone who has issue with conceiving. Kojo stood up immediately. No one is saying something is wrong with you, he said. We are just trying to understand what is happening. Benita looked at him. Her expression was different now. I've been praying, Kojo, she said. I've done everything I'm supposed to do as a woman in this situation. Kojo nodded. I know you have. Then he added, but prayers doesn't stop information. Benita looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked back slowly and sat on the bed again. I don't want this hospital talk every time, she said. Kojo responded immediately. It won't be every time if we go once, just to know what we are dealing with. Benita looked down at her hands. She pressed her fingers together, then loosened them, then pressed them again. Kojo softened his voice. I'm not forcing you today, he said, but I don't want us to avoid the truth forever. Benita finally spoke, but her voice was lower now. I just feel like if I go there and they say something, it changes everything. Kojo looked at her. It already has changed everything, he said. She didn't reply because she knew what she meant, even if she didn't want to admit it. Kojo reached for his phone before leaving the room. He paused at the door. I just want us to stop guessing, he said. That's all. Then he walked out. Benita remained sitting on the bed. The room felt different now. Not because anything physical had changed, but because something had been named. Even if it's not fully spoken. She slowly laid back on the bed. Her eyes stayed open. The ceiling above her looked the same as always, but her mind wasn't staying still anymore. For the first time, the idea of hospital wasn't just a suggestion. It felt like a door, one she had been standing in front without realizing it. That night, Benita didn't sleep. She lay on her back for a long time, staring at the ceiling like she was waiting for her mind to slow down. But it didn't. The house was quiet. Kojo had turned away and slept after their conversation. But Benita remained awake beside him, fully aware of every small sound in the room. Everything felt normal, but her mind was not normal. She turned on her side, then back again. Then she sat up slightly. Nothing helped. Kojo's words kept coming back to her. Let's go to the hospital. Why are you afraid of confirming it? She lay on the bed again and closed her eyes. But instead of sleep, a memory came. Not the kind you choose, the kind that arrives without permission. A clinic. A smell she had never forgotten, even after all these years. The nurse's voice calling her name. Lie down here. She opened her eyes quickly in the present room. Her heart was beating faster now. She sat up fully on the bed. Kojo didn't move beside her. He was still asleep. Benita quietly got up from the bed and walked to the window. She stood there holding her arms close to herself. She whispered to herself, "It's in the past." She said it again, this time a little firmer. "It's in the past." She tried to believe it. She really did, because that was what she had done for years. She had taken that memory and locked it away. But standing there that night, she realized something she had never fully accepted. The past did not disappear. Her breathing slowed down. She leaned her back against the window glass. The memory came again, this time clearer. She was younger, confused and afraid, sitting in a waiting room with her hands tightly folded together. Her phone kept vibrating in her bag, but she didn't check it. She already knew the decision she had come for, even if she didn't fully understand what it would cost her later. A voice had told her, "You will be fine. It's quick." She remembered nodding, not because she was sure, but because she wanted the situation to end. The next part of the memory came in pieces. The clinic bed, the ceiling above her, the instructions to stay still, the silence that felt so loud, and after that, the emptiness. Something had changed in her body that she didn't fully understand at the time. Benita opened her eyes again in the present. Her fingers were trembling slightly. She walked back to the bed and sat down carefully. Kojo turned slightly in his sleep but didn't wake. She looked at him for a long time. His face was calm, peaceful and unaware. She whispered again, "It's in the past." But this time, her voice didn't bring comfort. It didn't settle anything. It only made her chest feel tighter, because something inside her had finally admitted the truth she had avoided for years. The past was not just a memory, it had consequences. And those consequences had been living with her inside her marriage without a name. She slowly lay back down, and for the first time, she understood what terrified her the most. It was not the hospital itself, it was what the hospital might confirm. Something she had suspected before but never allowed herself to fully face. Benita closed her eyes again, but sleep did not come, because now the thought had changed shapes in her mind. Because now the thought had changed shapes in her mind. It was no longer just fear, it was pressure. Kojo was right about one thing. They would eventually need answers. And deep down, Benita already knew something even heavier. Those answers would not just explain the present. They will open the door to a past she had spent her whole adult life pretending was already closed. The next morning, Kojo and Benita went together that morning. The drive was quiet, the kind of quiet where both people know something important is about to be said, but neither of them wants to speak first. At the hospital, tests were done, questions were asked, records were checked. Benita answered everything she had to answer. Kojo sat beside her the entire time. He didn't interrupt, he didn't react loudly, he just watched and listened. Then the doctor asked to speak with them privately. That was where everything changed. The doctor spoke in a calm voice. He explained what the results showed. He explained what had happened in the past. He explained what it meant for the present. Kojo didn't speak at first. He just listened. His face stayed still, but his eyes were fixed on the doctor, like he was trying to understand if he heard correctly. The doctor finished speaking. The room became quiet. Kojo looked at Benita. He didn't ask questions. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at her for a long time, like he was seeing her differently for the first time in years. Benita tried to speak. "Kojo, I didn't." He raised his hand upward to stop her. Then he asked one question. "Since when?" Benita hesitated. Her voice was low. "Before I met you." That was all she said. Kojo didn't respond immediately. He stood up, absorbing everything. Then he asked another question. "You knew this whole time?" Benita didn't answer right away, but her silence answered it. Kojo exhaled and looked away again. The doctor gave them space and stepped out of the room. Now, it was just the two of them. Kojo sat down. He stared at the floor for a very long time while Benita stood near a chair, not sure of where to place herself. Kojo finally spoke again. You told me you had only one serious relationship. Benita's lip parted slightly. I was trying to move from my past. Kojo shook his head once. That's not moving on. That's building something on top of something you hid. Benita stepped closer. I didn't think it would matter anymore. Kojo looked up at her immediately. That's the problem now. You didn't think. Silence followed again, longer this time. He rubbed his forehead like he was trying to steady himself. I married you based on what you told me, he said. Benita's voice dropped. I didn't lie to hurt you. Kojo nodded slowly. But you still built my decision on something incomplete. He stood up at that point, picked up his phone from the chair, then his car keys. Benita moved closer. Kojo, please, let's talk about this properly. He stopped for a moment, then looked at her. I don't think there's anything to fix here. Benita's voice shook. We can still work it through. Kojo shook his head again. No. That one word landed heavily. He turned toward the door. Benita followed him quietly. Kojo! He stopped for a second, but didn't turn fully. Benita stepped closer. I made mistakes in the past, but I choose you. I choose this life with you. Kojo finally turned to her face. You chose me? He said angrily. But you didn't choose honesty with me. Benita opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Kojo looked at her for a few seconds longer. Then he turned and walked away. Benita stood in the hospital corridor for a long time. Voices moved around her. Life continued normally for everyone else, but hers had stopped in that moment. She called his name once, no answer. She called again, still no answer. Then she understood. He wasn't coming back to the conversation. By the time she reached home later that day, the house felt different, like something that used to belong to her had already been removed. Kojo things were gone. Benita sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, her phone in her hand, unsure who to call, unsure what to say. She opened their chat, scrolled, typed something again, and then deleted it. Her eyes stayed fixed on the empty room. For the first time, the silence in the house did not feel peaceful. And in that silence, Benita finally understood something she had avoided for years. Some decisions don't stay in the past. Some decisions follows you until they destroy the future you try to build. And this time, there were no turning back. Thank you for watching this story. Kindly tell me your thoughts and lessons in the comment section. Do well to like and share with your loved ones. Don't forget, every life is a diary. See you in the next story.